Limit is y goes to pi of the cosine of y plus 1 divided by the sine of y. The first thing we're going to do is try plugging a pi in for each of the y's. So that'll give us the cosine of pi plus 1 divided by the sine of pi. The cosine of pi is a negative 1 plus 1, and then the sine of pi is a 0. Negative 1 plus 1 is a 0, and we have the 0 over 0 indeterminate form. This is resulting from trig functions, neither of which is squared, so we don't have any Pythagorean trig identities, neither of which have a 2y, so we don't have a double angle formula to make use of. However, we do have a trig combination happening in the numerator, cosine of y plus 1, so we can try multiplying by the trig conjugate. The trig conjugate is the same expression as the trig combination, which is in the numerator, but opposite sign between the terms. You always want to put it over itself so that we have a form of 1, so we don't change the value, just the look after we multiply these. And we will FOIL out the trig conjugate pair in the numerator. First, cosine y times cosine y is cosine squared of y. Outside, cosine of y times a negative 1 is a negative cosine of y. Inside, positive 1 times cosine of y is a positive cosine of y. And then last, positive 1 times a negative 1 is a negative 1. After FOILing out trig conjugates, the outside and inside terms should always cancel. Equal value, opposite sign. In the denominator, we do not have a trig conjugate pair, so we're not going to FOIL it out or distribute it. We're just going to leave it in its factored version. Now we still have 0 over 0 in the numerator because of the cos squared y minus 1, in the denominator because of the sine of y. Now, because it's the sine y that's making the 0 in the denominator, we need to be able to cancel with a sine of y in the numerator. But we don't have a sine of y just yet, and that's why we have to make use of a Pythagorean trig identity. We know that the sine squared of y plus the cosine squared of y equals to 1. We need to get the cos squared of y minus 1, so we need to rearrange this by subtracting a 1 to the left side and subtracting a sine squared of y to the right side, so that we see what we need to replace the numerator with. And it turns out to be replace it with a negative sine squared of y. At this point, we have a sine of y factor in the numerator and denominator that can cancel. There's 2 of them in the numerator, so there will be 1 left over. And we have limit as y goes to pi of the negative of sine y divided by cosine of y minus 1. We should no longer have the 0 over 0 indeterminate form, so we should be able to plug in a pi for the remaining y's. And that will give us the negative sine of pi divided by the cosine of pi minus 1. The sine of pi is a 0. The cosine of pi is a negative 1. The negative of 0 is just 0. Negative 1 minus 1 is a negative 2. 0 over any non-zero number is equal to 0.